Hello. Good afternoon, good morning, good night. All depends when you happen to be listening to this particular recording. This is a recording of Life Source Organ, Tissue, and Eye Donation Education. And I probably presented this live at your facility. And don't you wish you were just seeing me live right with you? Well, probably not. But I probably did that. And this recording is an opportunity for other people to see that. Now, I want you to understand that even though this is a recording, I'm watching. And if you just turn this on and you're watching the TV or you're doing something on your phone, I'm going to know. Well, with that said, let me share my screen and start this slideshow going. I'm hoping you can see that. And I will view the recording myself so I'll know whether you can see it or not. So it's how you can help save lives, how you can help save lives, organ, eye, and tissue donation. This is course 2073. It is a North Dakota Nurses Association CEU approved. And so that's why you need to watch this and send me an evaluation. But I'll tell you about that in just a minute. Let's start with this. Why would you want to listen to me? You need to know who in the world I am. Well, I'm a husband, father, and grandfather, and let me introduce you to Tallulah. Tallulah, she's busily working on a menu. She didn't want to look up. She was just too busy doing that. She's a little over 2 now. I also have a couple others. This is Tucker and Gavin, along with Tallulah and my wife. So that's who I am. Isn't that family the important thing? By trade, I'm a chaplain. I was a local pastor. I worked in hospice, and then I became a hospital chaplain. In fact, was the manager of the chaplains in Grand Forks. I'm a board certified chaplain, meaning I took 1,600 hours of clinical pastoral education, CPE, to attain this and had to do some interviews and things to be able to become certified. I always like to mention CPE because one of the things we do in CPE is reflective learning. When you go to see a patient or their family, it's all about them, right? Isn't that what it should be? But when you step out of the room, it's all about you. What in that experience triggered something in me? Did I hear something about a disease that concerns me? Was there something about that situation that caused me some anxiety? And you reflect on that and see why that happened. I just commend that to you. That's for free. You don't have to pay anything extra for that. I'm a hospital partner liaison for LifeSource, which basically means I work with your hospital, your facility, and others to do things like this education, to work through other issues around donation and so on. I am your kind of first contact, if you will, in general with LifeSource. And I always like to point out I'm a father of a nurse. My other children would say, well, what's wrong with being a principal or a statistician or an electrical engineer or a controller? And there's nothing wrong with any of those things. But for your purposes, you probably need to know I spend a lot of time talking to my child that's a nurse. Of course, she's not a child anymore. She's now works with Ethos Hospice as a executive. So let's get to a different question. It's always good to know why. Why take this course? Well, maybe it's because you know that I'm such a dynamic speaker. Well, you probably don't know that because I have cute grandchildren. Well, I do, but that's probably not why you're on here. There they are again. Because we have to, and that might be it. You've been told that you need to have this education every year, and here you are. But maybe it's most of all because we need to know how this works. Should there be a donation opportunity at your hospital? Should the process be going on? How does it work? Probably most of all, it's because we believe in life. You are working at your facility to help people to live, and we're doing the same. at LifeSource. When you can't fix someone anymore, perhaps they have an opportunity to give life to someone else. Well, here's learning objectives. Again, this is a CEU course. And so the objectives are, we're going to describe your role in the donation process. 2, we're going to identify the organs and tissues that can be donated. We're going to summarize the referral process for potential organ, tissue, and eye donors. We're going to explain required documentation, how to complete it, and we'll answer questions. Now, obviously, I'm not there live with you, or I'd be answering any question you have as we go along. But you'll see my email at the end, and your leader would also be able to contact me if you have something, hey, I really want to know this, and I'd be happy to help you with that. Let's start with this. What is LifeSource? LifeSource is an organ procurement organization, an OPO. These were created by the federal government and designated based upon population. There's 56 OPOs nationwide, and LifeSource is the second largest by area, serving 7 million people. We have 9 transplant centers in our area, and we serve 279 plus hospitals and similar facilities. Here you can see the where we are. We're the Dakotas and Minnesota and a couple counties in Wisconsin, and we're only smaller than this one over here. That's Montana, Idaho, Washington, and Alaska. And over 3,000 people wait in the LifeSource area for transplant. I think we've actually gotten underneath 3,000. It's more like 2,700 now. But we still have a lot of people waiting in our very region for this. LifeSource has a vision. Everyone shares the gift of life. Everyone shares it. We have life. Our mission is we save lives and offer hope and healing through excellence in organ, eye, and tissue donation. And our values, 5 of them: respect, accountability, advocacy, life, and innovation. Now, you know this place? It's the same old guy that you saw on the picture earlier. If you know this place, it's the Grand Canyon. And it's a cool picture, not of me, but of the canyon. But what's the big deal on a picture? It's really all about the point of view. When I was there, it is awe-inspiring. To see my picture, you're probably going, eh. Here's a family. They're looking at a couple flags. A mom and her 2 sons. They're missing the man of the family. His name was Stacy, who died in a tragic accident, but who became a donor. It's all about the point of view. This is a donation family who's the husband of the wife and the father of these 2 young men gave life to 3 other people. From that point of view, you can see how important something is. And then let me introduce you to Sally. She's a recipient. She received, as her clothing says, a transplant in the 23rd in 06. Now, if you can add up real quick, she actually has a 100-year-old liver, and she's a 79-year-old person. Her life was saved, and she saw 3 grandchildren she had never seen, and she has made such a difference in so many lives. See, it's all about the point of view, how important these things are. Now, the hope of LifeSource is the same as your hope. We enjoy when patients get better and their families can enjoy having their loved ones back. But if that doesn't happen, both your hospital and LifeSource seek to save lives and offer hope and healing through excellence in organ, tissue, and eye donation when a healthy recovery is not possible. 2022 was a record-breaking year. We had 222 donors with 760 organs transplanted and over 1,000 tissue donors with over 80,000 lives potentially impacted. And all of these things were increases as donation comes to be something that people accept more and more. But I want you to see this little 4-letter word up at the top of this slide. Donation is rare. In 2022, we received about 30,000 referrals. Of those referrals, which basically mean most of those were deaths, 3,600 were vented referrals. They came to us, they were at end of life, but they were vented, and they had potential to be organ donors. Only 555 of them were real potentially organ donors, and there were 244 actual organ donors. Now you'll notice that number is bigger than the one on the previous slide, and that's because we consider anyone who is intended to do this. We have people that come to the OR ready to, and this deceased donor is ready to, is going to give the gift of life to other people, but when they open in for surgery, they find metastasized cancer or something else. We consider those people still donors because the intention of the donor and the family is still there. And of course, the 1,059 tissue donors and 409 eye donors, with all those potential lives healed. We are not the only eye procurement organization. We work with the Lions as well. Now this is going to be, the slide is a little small, but let me hit some numbers. In the United States, over 100,000 people are waiting for life-saving organ transplants. We never seem to get under 100,000. Every year, about 10,000 people end up becoming donors. In the upper Midwest, there's about 3,000 people in need, and maybe a little less than that now. The entire organ recovery process typically takes place in less than 48 hours, although in a region for organs, now this is organs, we're going to talk about organs, tissue, and eye. Out in the region, it might be a little longer because we have to get staff there or whatever. And here's the sad part on the other side. 22 people die every day while waiting for a transplant. They come off that list. But on the other hand, every 10 minutes, a new person is in need of a transplant and added to the list. One donor can save up to 8 lives through organ donation. And again, organ donation is rare. Only 1% of people actually qualify to become an organ donor after passing. Now, we're going to talk about organ donation a little bit, even though your hospital may be one where organ donation doesn't happen because you have to have an active ICU with ventilators and all the various things for this to happen. And so maybe your patients are ones that pass through your hospital and were sent along to a bigger place for that. But in terms of organ donation, there's 8 lives that can be saved by organ donation. Can you think for just a minute what those 8 organs might be? Now, don't think of the eye, even though we might call that an organ system. That's different. The skin or something like that aren't organs in this particular sense. But what are the 8? Well, let's look and see. We'll do that in just a second here. Organs come from a person who's mechanically ventilated with a heartbeat at time of consult. The recovery takes place in the OR through after evaluation, during which time a patient remains in the ICU. Recovery is performed by transplant surgeons. Once removed from the body, gifts must be transplanted within hours of recovery. A heart maybe can stay out of the body 6 hours, a kidney maybe 24. Ages 0 to 100. And of course, as you get older, it's less likely, but it's still possible. We're going to ask that question again. Have tissue have already had cardiac time of death. They've already died. Recovery for tissue takes place within 24 hours of death, and recovery is performed by highly trained LifeSource team members. Gifts can be preserved and stored for an extended period of time. Some tissues and such from the body can be stored up to 5 years. And again, ages 0 to 100. But tissues can be recovered. Think about that for a minute. What is from the body could be recovered in terms of tissues? Well, let's go ahead and answer that. In this slide, you can see the things recovered through organ donation process is in the gray. Remember, there were 8. There's 2 lungs, a heart, that's 3, 2 kidneys, that's 5. The liver is 6. The pancreas is 7, often transplanted with a kidney. And the intestine can be transplanted, though it is pretty even rarer than the others. The most likely to be transplanted, what do you think that is of these organs? That's right over here, kidneys. About 3 reasons for that. First of all, there's 2 of them. Second, there's living donation. many people, surprisingly number of people donate one of the kidneys if they're a healthy person. And the other reason it's so often transplanted is that it's the greatest need. Of those 2,700 in our region, probably about 2,000 of them are looking for a kidney. Then recovered in oranges through the tissue donation process, corneas, sclera, bone marrow, skin, connective tissue, tendons, veins, bone, and heart valves. Well, let's look a little bit at the organ donor process. There's two ways to come into being an organ donor. One way is donation after brain death. That's the very traditional way where someone has been, with a clinical diagnosis, has been shown to be brain dead. And I'm going to show you a picture in a moment that'll show how that is. There's an exam consistent with brain death determined by neurological criteria. There's tests. There's a whole number of things that go on. Donation is discussed with the family by LifeSource. Donation designation disclosed, or we seek authorization from the legal next of kin. The patient is supported during organ evaluation and allocation process. We have to find out where these gifts could go before we have surgery to remove them. The deceased patient, remember, if you're brain dead, you have died, even though it doesn't look like it, is transferred to the OR and the surgical recovery begins. Becoming more common is donation after circulatory death. The brain death exam is not consistent with brain death. There is blood flow, there is electrical activity. And the family and the MD initiate the topic of withdrawal of medical treatment, actually trying to fix things with the family. And if that decision is made, the LifeSource coordinator has a donation discussion with the family. If the family is supportive of donation, we continue on. They're evaluated for potential DCD, donation after cardiac, sorry about that, after cardiac death, and we seek authorization from the legal next of kin. The patient is supported. This patient is still alive, probably not going to survive very long, but is still alive. They're supported during organ evaluation and allocation. And the withdrawal of support, the withdrawal of the breathing tube, happens in the OR, and the pronouncement of death by the hospital, not by LifeSource, happens in the OR. And the surgical recovery waits 5 minutes after that declaration of death, just as an extra fail-safe. And then the family who may be with them leaves, and the transplant teams come in to recover these gifts. Let's look at this another way. Brain death is different than a coma. In brain death, all brain tissue is dead, and I'm going to show you that in a second. No electrical activity in the brain, and there's no blood flow. In a coma, the brain is injured, and it may be severely injured, but it's only a portion of it. There is electrical activity, and there is blood flow. Brain death is not a coma. Brain death is death. In a brain dead patient who is still is intubated, has the respirator going, looks like they are sleeping. Their heart is beating, their chest is moving, the patient is warm, skin has color, they continue to be monitored. There's no outward evidence of death. But here's a live brain with blood flow, electrical activity, and here's one that's not. This person has died. It's not a coma. They're not going to wake up from it. They're brain dead. It's just a good thing to realize in case you have somebody ask you about that in some context. Let's talk about registration a little bit before we get over to tissue donation. The most common way to register is on your license. North Dakota, you get this little red heart down there. Somebody asked me once, does that mean the heart? No, that means that you've consented to be a donor. And if you've said, I want to be a donor, you have made a choice. And if you're over 18, that choice is legally binding and cannot be undone by your family. So it's really important that when you make this choice, you tell your family, hey, I'm a donor, so don't be surprised should something happen, and we hope nothing does, but don't be surprised when that comes up. Meet this young man, Nehemiah Larimer. He was an organ donor just prior to graduating high school. And below is his mom listening to his, obviously it's not his heartbeat. It's actually listening to a kidney, which isn't real, but she is with the person that's whose life was saved by one of Nehemiah's gifts. Potential donors must be ventilated in order to be an organ donor. Collaboration and care for the family is extremely important to our team. We know the family is important to you. It's important to us too. Communication with the hospital care team, that's you, and transplant surgeons is crucial to us. In an ICU, they might have this trigger card. When to have a donation referral, loss of 2 or more brainstem reflexes prior to any end of life conversation, anticipated withdrawal of life-sustaining support. Or if the family mentions donation, we want to answer their questions. Even if donation can't happen, we want to answer their questions. And for those of you in smaller hospitals, you often call us a cardiac death. I want you to notice that the age requirement for making a referral for premature babies went from 20 weeks to 36 weeks. To transplant centers have said that you really can't deal with that small material before that point. So it's 36 weeks. But when in doubt, call. DCD in the family. Again, donation after cardiac death. The family is allowed to come in. We have compassion and draping. Behind that blue curtain is the transplant instruments, but everything is covered up so that they just come up and they can hold the hand of their loved one. I showed you a family earlier, a mother and 2 sons. They spent time with Stacy for the 20 minutes after he was extubated until he died. And then they left and the transplant surgeons came in and the OR looked very much like this. 29% of all life source organ donors are DCD. This is just a busy slide. You don't have to read everything here, but it just shows how many different people are involved in being an organ donor, from a cardiologist to a lung team, to a transportation, to an eye bank, radiology, all sorts of people involved in making this happen. UNOS, the United Network for Organ Sharing, we get from the hospitals, LifeSource does, donor information that's given to UNOS. The recipient information comes from a transplant center, and at UNOS, these are matched. And then we are allowed to talk to each other to see how we can make that match work for that recipient and that donor. We honor donors, organ donors, by a moment of silence. That's happening on the left here. It's kind of a misnomer because it's not a moment of silence, even though they take just a little bit of silence. It starts by a reading of words that the family had to say. For example, Stacy's family wrote in that they had known Stacy to be someone that wanted to help anyone. He was trying to help somebody along the road when this accident happened. In the middle, you see the Donate Life flag raised. In April is Donate Life Month, and so flags are raised in many places, but at bigger hospitals like Avera here, this flag is raised when there is a donation. And this is a walk of honor. On the right, the donor and the family, with their permission, all these are with your permission, come down the hall and are honored by the staff waiting out there for them. Now, tissue and eye donation. LifeSource, I'm going to read this because it's LifeSource screens, recovers, packages, and ships donated tissue and corneas to processors. Sounds very formalized. We recover the material, the skin, the bone, and so on, and then processors make that into donated into grafts that are distributed to surgeons. Sorry, I forgot my word there. There's over 1 million tissue transplants performed every year. And this circle just shows how this whole process goes for that. Now, this little, whoops, I went ahead again. This little phrase up here, if I was live with you, I'd play this YouTube video. If you're really fast, you can type it down, but I'll probably just send this link along. It's hard to show a video while you're doing a video. I'll send this link along. It's a fascinating story about a lady who lost her son and later became the recipient of some of his tissue. So I will see that your leader gets that, and or if you want, you can contact me directly. So let's talk about the process. Tissue donation process, referral and assessment. We are referred for potential organ, eye, and tissue donation. Remote EMR access streamlines the process. That's usually for bigger hospitals. The referrals that come from a smaller hospital are referrals that come after death. A person has died. And when a person's died, you have things that you take care of. You take care of that family first. You take care of that patient with the same care you have. And then as soon as you can, we'd like it within an hour, you call LifeSource and we will ask questions. And out of those questions, and the more questions we ask, the more likely something's going to happen. We'll see if this person has potential to be a donor, a tissue donor. Again, after death, this is a tissue donor. And if there looks like there's potential, then we will speak with the family. And if there's ever a chance that the family's still around and we can talk to them, we just as soon have you there. They know you, they don't know us. And we're just on the phone. And you and us are partners. And we'll talk with the family about donation opportunities, and have that conversation. Out of that conversation, let's say that conversation goes to where they want their loved one to be a tissue donor or an eye donor. We will review the medical social history. If you've ever donated blood, all those questions you have to answer. Well, for organ and tissue donation, I meant if you've ever had given blood, you've had to answer all those questions. For tissue and organ donation, there's even more questions. We conduct infectious disease testing as necessary, COVID and such. We work with the medical examiner. We'll work with the funeral director. We'll match donors with tissue processing partners based upon medical criteria. Certain processors deal with some kinds of things. Other processors deal with other kinds of things. The tissue and eyes are recovered by the LifeSource team members, our surgical recovery specialists, and sent to the processing partners. And then we will follow up with that family and in ongoing individualized care if they want. We're not going to bug them if they don't want to be. Tissue uses. Bone, 90% of donors can give bone, orthopedic, spinal, reconstructive following cancer or trauma. Now, very, very extraordinarily rare is it where we take a whole bone and transfer that whole bone to another person because it has to fit exactly. Much more likely is there a little piece of a bone or even a paste made out of the bone that can be used to repair orthopedic problems or a hole or whatever in bones. Connective tissue, 61% of donors can give that for joint reconstruction. That video that you could watch tells a story about that. Bladder and uterine slings, that connective tissue makes a lot of difference. Heart valves, 34% of donors. This is when the heart can't be transplanted itself. And you'll see the first word there is a very sad one, children. There's children that need a heart valve. And unfortunately, of course, the only way they get a heart valve is this, there's been a tragedy in some other family. So there's joy over here, there's sadness over here. Heart valves are much better. That medicine has tried to work with artificial valves and so on, but heart valves from a person are much better. They have a better function. Saphenous and femoral for bypass dialysis shunts. And I want you to notice it says male donors. Can you think for a second, why would it be male donors mainly for these veins and arteries? Why? Well, if there's a fella, I always tease that us fellas, we have thick heads and we have thick veins. It's the thickness. They're easier to deal with from male donors. Skin, 40% of donors can give skin. Burn victims, severe reconstruction following mastectomy, and wound care. Wound care sometimes needs several of those. Eyes can restore vision, enhance vision, and then there's research and education. Sometimes we ask to take a whole eye or other things. There's been research projects done on uteruses, on bladders, and sometimes we'll ask separately of a family, could we use some of this for research? And you can say yes to transplantation, but no to research. But research and education saves lives too. The cornea. I always like to start at the bottom of this slide. The corneas are the most transplantable human tissue, and corneal blind people are able to see. The reason it's the most transplantable human tissue is there's no blood flow to it, and so it doesn't have to have a blood type and so on. The cornea contributes between 65 and 75% of the eye's total focusing power, and it is very important. And these cornea transplants, and it just shows the basic process. You take one off and put one on. Sometimes it's a patch, more or less, make a difference. We want to be able to see, and it's amazing when we can give that gift of sight to someone else. In eye care for donation, you may have in your hospital's policies what you do for eye care. When a decision about eye care is pending, or when you know the deceased will be a donor, you elevate the head above the shoulder height about 30 degrees. You gently close the eyelids. You use paper tape to keep the eyelids closed and prevent the corneas from drying out. And you apply light ice pack or ice-filled caregiver gloves over closed lids. Don't use commercial ice packs. They are just plain, too cold. We cannot freeze the tissue. That's not the point. It's to keep it cool and moist. And our donation coordinator, when they're talking to you, will say, this is what we need to do to preserve the eye's possibility for donation. Autopsies, the ME is always in control, but autopsies do not rule out donation. Almost always we can work with the medical examiner to make donation happen. It can happen at the hospital, or it can sometimes happen after the autopsy, even sometimes in the actual coroner's office in their rooms, because unlike organ that has to be in a very sterile environment, tissue doesn't have to be in as sterile as sterile an environment. Autopsies are transferred to the medical examiner's office, who holds the jurisdiction over the county in which your hospital is located. Think about it. You probably have a local medical examiner, but there's also a medical examiner in our state, Bismarck, Grand Forks, and so on. And where would yours be transferred to if they needed to go to something like that? When donation proceeds, you follow your own policy for completing the death record. You have a checklist, follow your checklist. If there's going to be donation, we have to have the proper ID band. It has to be. If the ID band has been lost, it needs to be replaced, or we cannot take that donor. You need to note the outcome of the donation evaluation on the death record. We called LifeSource about this patient. The LifeSource said there was no possibility for donation because of medical things. We called LifeSource about this patient. LifeSource says there's potential. They approached the family. The family said no. We called LifeSource about this patient, and LifeSource approached the family, and they said yes, and donation proceeded. Note that donation referral number on the death record. That's 6 digits, which are the date, and then it's dash, and then it's 3 digits, which are the number of the referral of that day. That's how we identify them. You notify the funeral home that donation will be taking place. Make sure you call us first so that we can maybe even just say, nope, nothing's going to happen. So release to the funeral home. And we might perhaps talk to the funeral home ourselves if we need that person, that patient kept. But our donation coordinator will work that through with you. We just don't want to cause the funeral home to come flying in and wanting to take care of this person when there's going to be a donation and they're going to need to wait. Following collaboration with LifeSource, let the funeral home know they will be contacted when donation is complete and the body is ready for release. Tissue transfers. I'm not going to read this whole slide. I want you to notice right in the middle here. In 2022, 90% of all tissue donors in Minnesota and North Dakota were transferred to Minneapolis. If you're in the far west of the state of North Dakota, it's maybe a little less likely, but it is still very possible that instead of trying to fly our folks and all their stuff to your location, that it's easier to have the funeral director trade service, who has all the licenses, pick the person up in a vehicle, drive them to the cities, and then return them to the funeral home. It may be almost quicker to do that than to try to get our folks there and arrange for everything to be worked out. You may be asked to cool the donor prior to transfer, follow your hospital's cooling protocol. And by the way, if you have to buy ice, LifeSource will stand the cost of that if you keep the receipt. Autopsies, the autopsies will be transferred to the respective offices, and LifeSource, especially in the Twin Cities, can recover tissue there or at our own location. Or when, again, we don't transfer to Minneapolis unless the family says yes. But we will recover where possible. This is our office in North Minneapolis. If you remember the George Floyd murder, wasn't that far away from there, and we actually couldn't send anybody to work for the days afterward. We have a donor wall. You see them etching their names of their donor onto a piece of paper. It's a beautiful, beautiful place, and we're right next to the river. If anybody ever would like to go see the place, you let me know and we'll figure out when you're going to be there, and we'll see if we can get you to be able to see our offices and perhaps even the surgical rooms if they're not being used, if one of them isn't being used at the time. The LifeSource has two main parts of our strategic plan. One is to increase organ donation, and it's also going to be to increase tissue donation. And the other is to reflect the diversity of our community by 2025. We want our staff to look more like the people with whom we work. And in the cities, there are many minorities. And one of the reasons we want to do that is not just for our looks, but to help people to respond to donation. LifeSource authorization rates are historically lower among diverse groups. American Indians, only 25%. Down here, whites are 65%. Asians only authorize 18% of the time. I'm hoping that's going up, and I'm hoping these statistics are a little old. Black, 45%. And you kind of know why that is, because of how the medical system in the United States has treated minorities historically in some very negative ways. And so we're attempting to be very diverse as much as we can and to have strong partnerships with communities, listening to what they say. In North Dakota, that has to do many times with listening to the Native American point of view and trying to understand it and engage with them. In that line, the little fellow that just appeared on your screen down there, his name is Grayson. And the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa, they named a law Grayson's Law. Grayson was a heart recipient. Just that you can see just here, he was just had gotten this. He'd lived for a few months, but it didn't take. But because of the work of his grandmother and mother and family and the tribe up there, they now are able to put donor designation on their tribal IDs. That's a fantastic thing in honor of this handsome young man here. So Let's look at a couple myths about donation. Sometimes people are allowed to die so their organs can be taken. Now, this is a survey done by Mayo Clinic, and people think that. No, for two reasons. One, it's unethical, it's wrong. People wouldn't do it. But also, if you just allow someone to die, you can't allow the organs won't be good. It doesn't work. If I agree to donate my organs, the hospital staff won't work as hard to save my life. Hey, you're nurses and such. Are you going to work hard? Sure you will. That's the first thing we'd like to do, is to save people before they ever get to that point. If they can't recover, that's another place. But we want them to recover. Maybe I won't be dead when they sign my death certificate. Yeah, people actually believe that. No, you will be. My religion is against organ donation. Some person's personal spiritual beliefs might be, or we might have cultural things, like in our Native Americans would like to leave the world complete. Native Americans are very clear that they want to help their community. And so those two things go two different directions on organ donation, and we try to engage with them. But there's no full organized religion that's against organ donation that I have heard of. Not any one. Not any Christians. The Jehovah's Witnesses are good with organ donation. They don't want blood transfers during life. Someone asked me about Scientology. Scientology is not against organ donation. I'm too old to donate. No. The oldest organ donator I know of in our region was 92. The oldest eye donor was 107. Donated his corneas or her corneas. So, well, age is a factor, but it's not a final factor. And LifeSource will pressure the family to donate. No, we won't. First of all, it wouldn't work. When you're pressured to do something, you run away from it. It doesn't work. And second, we don't think it's the right thing to do. We want to encourage people to see what great possibilities there are in donation. Hey, time for a test. Have you learned something new? You'll find these kind of easy. True or false? There's going to be an autopsy. Donation can't proceed because of timing. You're right. That's false. We work with the medical examiner and usually can work it through. A proper ID band must be issued and placed on the donor. Donation cannot occur without it. That's true. True or false? I should call the funeral home before I call LifeSource to give them a heads up. Call us. That's false. Call us first. Be aware that the family might even call the funeral, but call us first so that we maybe can rule out quickly, or we can say, hey, we need to keep this person there while we evaluate more and talk to the family. True or false? All hospital deaths must be referred to screening for donation potential. I don't think I said this in there, but that's a national law. The United Anatomical Gift Act says all deaths in a hospital must be referred to an OPO. It's not LifeSource law. That's national law. True or false? There's an age limit when considering organ and tissue donation. Nope. No, there is not. Age is a factor, and you're less likely as you get older, but it can happen. Organ and tissue donation are rare opportunities. I hope I made a big deal about that little 4-letter word, R-A-R-E, rare. It is true. Less than 1% can be organ donors, have any potential to be. The donor coordinator, from LifeSource will inform you if donation opportunities exist. Yes, after asking some questions and maybe asking some more and maybe asking some more. It's not up to you to assess a patient's ability to donate. That's our donor coordinators can do that. True or false? If the deceased qualifies to be a donor, the donation coordinator from LifeSource will attempt to speak to the family. Yep, you're right. That's true. We'll attempt to speak to the family. Sometimes that's the hardest thing for us to do, is get a hold of a family, because this is right after their loved one has died. Sometimes they don't want to answer the phone anymore. True, farce, true or farce? What's that? True or false? Heart valves and connective tissue are examples of life-giving gifts which may be donated. Absolutely. Eye donation may be possible even if a patient has cancer. I don't think I said this, but you should have got it from where it says the eyes don't have blood flow. Cancer will not rule them out, especially for eyes. There's the answers. What questions do you have? Now, in a second here, I'm going to show you my information. But if you have a question, I'm always willing to answer it. You can either run it through your leader. You can, as you'll see later, you'll see my phone number and my email. Please send it to me. I always think there's new things I could learn. This is Stacy's family again. From death, on their side, comes life for 3 other people. From tragedy, this was a tragic thing that happened, comes joy for others. From despair comes hope. LightSource.org is a place you can find many resources for yourself and for others, and stories and all sorts of things. Check it out sometime. Life-source.org. And this is my title and my email and my work phone. If you have a question, feel free to call me. If there's a problem with something, you can call me and I will see what I can do to help you out. Thank you very much for listening to this. I appreciate you. My daughter's a nurse, and I know that at my age, I'm eventually going to be there in the hospital sometime and being taken care of by wonderful folks like you. And I know you're going to do a great job. Thank you, and have a good rest of your day. And make sure to fill out that evaluation form that you were given, because that's my proof that you viewed this to earn that nursing CEU, should you ever be audited by the Nursing Association. So fill that out, get it to your leader, send it to me, scan it to me, make sure I have it. Hey, thank you very much.